Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Ruffman. I am your host, John Ruffman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. Yesterday, I spoke about the fact that beginning on Friday, we will have an interactive 15 minutes. At least that'll be the start. So your questions coming to us will be critical. I want to remind you, and I will do it at the end of this podcast, that you can write me at Apple Podcasts. You can drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify. You can click any of the links to the show notes to connect with me in social media. And the point will be to get your questions. And your questions are the things that we will try to answer every Friday for about 15 minutes, maybe a little longer. We'll see how it goes. But this addition to the show is dependent completely on you. So make sure you note your name and your question. Keep it brief. GoGo will review them, and then we will begin that process starting this Friday. And we hope every Friday for a long time to come. I want now to address with you some serious issues. First of all, the USS Abraham Lincoln is steaming, if you will, toward Iran. The president has pledged that an armada is going to go and deal with what is going on right now in Iran. And we should know that despite the president's assurances, deaths are taking place. Demonstrations are being stopped. We don't know who has been hung or tortured. We don't know that, but we know that the Iranian regime is cracking down. And more than that, we know that the Iranian regime is saying they will not brook any interference by the United States. This, my friends, represents a real escalation of what's going on right now. And it goes to the heart of a president's power in terms of foreign policy. Why is the Abraham Lincoln heading toward Iran? Because the president has ordered that action. I want to remind you, and I want us all to consider carefully, that the power of the president as commander-in-chief is virtually unlimited. The War Powers Act, as we have discussed, is not an effective tool to present a situation where Congress can say to the president, don't do it. So it's not a preventive action. And so what we now face is a question of what Donald Trump will order. And again, I want to emphasize and underline the fact that it is the president's determination. By the way, I have no sympathy for the Iranian regime, none at all. Nothing would give me greater pleasure than to see regime change. But the question is, should the United States be the instigator? Or should we be, as the president is suggesting, support the people of Iran in their efforts? And that's a good question, because the question then becomes, how directly involved does the United States become? Our history with Iran, beginning with the overthrow of Mossadegh in the 1950s, is a frankly unpleasant one. And certainly our support for the Shah became an obstacle to our policy. Although, in retrospect, the Shah makes the current leadership of Iran look pretty good. But you have to understand, Savak, the secret police of the Shah, became the lightning rod for so many people who were objecting to what Iran was doing. I can still remember the demonstrations that took place in Beverly Hills in Southern California because of the Shah's sister living there. This is a moment of testing, and how far the president will go in terms of Iran, well, that remains to be seen. But I believe we will be following this carefully. You don't put all of the ship power and manpower and air power into a region of the world and then do nothing. And clearly, the Iranian leadership is saying they will not be intimidated by this display of force. So we're going to watch carefully. And now let me turn to the domestic scene. The members of Congress, Democrats all, are calling for the impeachment of Kristi Noem. Let me explain to you, the president so far is backing Kristi Noem. And impeaching a cabinet officer, very dicey. You have to go way back in American history, and this is not my time for a history lesson, to understand that the probability of such an effort being successful is minimal, even if there is cause. There is a question about Kristi Noem and what she's doing. And the president, as long as he backs her, she will remain in the cabinet. And we have another question that needs to be asked, and that has to do with the White House staff. And the question of whether Stephen Miller, who has been outspoken in his support of the president and has made outrageous statements, whether Stephen Miller will be retained. Let me remind you, he is Deputy White House Chief of Staff. So far, the president stands with Noem and stands with Miller. And let me go a step further and ask the simple question, what will the president do about Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, not Secretary of War, but defense secretary? Will he embrace Pete Hegseth in the future? At what point does the president cut his losses? And the simple truth is, he doesn't seem to want to do that. Let's take a look at the case of Greg Bavino, who is in charge of our border patrol. He was removed from Minneapolis, but, and it's an important but, he has not been removed from his service for the border patrol. He's right back here in California, at least that's where he's going to be, to handle his routine business as he has done in the past, in the words of the president, protecting our border. This is something else which we need to understand clearly and precisely. The issue is not the impeachment of minor officials. And I would say Kristi Noem is a minor official, even though she's a cabinet officer. The question is, what is the will of the President of the United States? And whether it's moving the USS Abraham Lincoln to off the coast of Iran, or it is the question of the President of the United States backing a cabinet officer, or whether it is a President of the United States backing his Deputy Chief of Staff in the White House and obviously one of his closer advisors, who is president matters. And the question is, who, in fact, should the president be looking at? And that's the question. Ilhan Omar, a member of Congress from Minnesota, who has been under constant attack from Donald Trump, was herself assaulted yesterday. I have to tell you, it doesn't surprise me. The president has instigated this kind of reaction and violence. By the way, I am not a fan of Ilhan Omar. There are many things, and we could make the case to you today for reasons why I'm very upset that she's even in Congress. But she is an American citizen. She was elected by her constituents. She serves at their pleasure. And you know what? That's democracy. Sometimes you get people you like, sometimes you get people you don't like. And that applies, by the way, to Donald Trump. He was elected fairly. And even though many of us are beside ourselves over actions being taken by this president, that was the will of the people. Now, somebody will say, but we didn't know all the facts. Well, you never know all the facts before an election. A record is made after an election. And one of the things we are learning is that when a president is limited in terms of running for re-election, essentially, that president has no fear of what the voters might do. But let's be clear. The voters have the ability to react. And no doubt, in November, at the midterm elections, we will react strongly. And if you believe the polls, Donald Trump and the Republican Party, well, they are in deep, deep trouble. Now, what happens if the Democrats sweep the House? Well, there's no question. Sweeping the House, by the way, does not mean overwhelming majorities. We're talking about narrow majorities, no matter what they are. And when I say narrow, I mean not enough to really change the course of the administration. What we know is that an impeachment resolution will come almost certainly from the House. Democrats are very upset, and a few Republicans, just a few, who are now speaking out about what's happening in Minnesota. But the issue is not impeachment. The question is conviction. And I want to remind everybody that to convict a person in a trial in the United States Senate requires 67 votes. If you have 100 senators, you need 2/3. That's 67. And the odds of that happening are virtually nil. So the constraints on the president in terms of what Congress can do seems to me to be extremely limited. The question is, what about the voice of the people? And clearly, the White House has shaken up what's happening in Minnesota because they understand how angry Democrats and Republicans and independents are about how things are unfolding. Will that change the action of the administration? Well, a lot of people are saying, look, with the addition of Tom Homan, who is a genuine servant of the people, all will be well. No, I don't think so. Tom Homan's record is spotty at best. And although he received an award from Barack Obama for his service, it is important to note that Tom Homan serves the President of the United States. And the problem is not what Homan does per se, but what the President expects him to do. And that applied with Greg Bombino, too, and with all the others. Let me also point out that we are learning more about what happened in those tragic hours in Minnesota. And Alex Preddy and his death have become a symbol of what is wrong. But let's not forget that as long as Donald Trump is in charge, his charge to his people is keep it tough, crack down, don't hesitate. And as long as you get direction from the top, that is exactly what is going to happen. I want to say a word about another issue that needs to be addressed, and that is the healthcare issue. As you know, Congress is now wrestling with the question of extending Obamacare. Now, most people that I know have health coverage, but a lot of people I don't know don't. And the fact is, the cost of healthcare is skyrocketing. And if, in fact, the president and the Republicans are able to put through a plan to gut the Affordable Care Act, to gut Obamacare, it will make a huge difference in the lives of millions of Americans. Now, I'm touching on this briefly, but it is a major, major crisis, a major concern, because everybody needs appropriate health care. I don't know about you, but if I need health care, I call my doctor, but I'm covered fully. So I expect appropriate service. And please understand, every American is entitled to that service. We are about to observe the birthday of Franklin Delano Roosevelt on January 30th, coming up just a few days. And one of the things that Roosevelt did when he outlined his plan for economic freedom for America was to include health care. He said, and he was right, that health care was vital, and he understood it clearly because when he came down with infantile paralysis, which confined him to a wheelchair from 1921 until his death in 1945, Franklin Roosevelt understood the need for health care. So these are all issues which are pressing, all things which must be addressed, and how the Congress, and yes, the Republicans and the Democrats together, but you need the Republicans too, how these issues are addressed may well determine the future not only of Donald Trump, but the future of the Republican Party, and indeed the fate of our nation. So I am going to be looking ahead now to all of the things going on, and we are going to follow all of this very carefully, right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman. Remember, please, that you can ask me any question you want, because the segment beginning Friday will give us an opportunity to engage directly. Make sure you include your name and the question, and we'll go through them and we'll answer as many as we can. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. And of course, you can write a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, and click any of the links in the show notes to connect with me on social media. And that includes questions. Remember to share this episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which, of course, is our goal. And this show has been getting so much positive attention that we're excited to bring on the advertising support. The intent with the advertising support is to create more opportunities for around the political world. And, well, we'll keep you posted on that as well. Of course, my deep appreciation to Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this program. Thanks, Gogo. I am John Rothman. Heaven only knows where the world will be in 24 hours, but you and I will be right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman. Thanks for tuning in.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.